It's finally made it.
So how do you pronounce your name?
Well, basically people just call me Chi.
Chi.
Yeah, Chi Wang is fine, easier.
Chia-Chi Wang.
Yeah, Chia-Chi is my full, direct, literal translation of my Chinese name. But I found out people have problem pronouncing that for years. I found out people have problem pronouncing that. So just call me Chi. I go, that's much easier.
Make it a little bit easy.
Yeah, make it easy for them, make it easy for me. And then, because technically there's no other Chi out there most of the time when you walk around. So when they call somebody, say, hey, Chi, I go, they're calling me probably.
Yeah,
that's really how it is these days, Yeah. But that's fine. I've been known as Chi for since my high school days. They just call me that.
Live from the Talking Joe Studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and you are listening to Talking Joe. If you are new to Talking Joe, you can find us at talkingjoe.co.uk. Now, we are continuing our content from the floor of JoeFest. Now, a great thing about going to a show like JoeFest are the things that happen that are completely unpredictable that arise. One such moment was when I was wandering the floor and bumped into Josh Eggerbeen at the After Action Report booth. And he said to me, well, Mark, you gotta talk to this guy. Gee, he's been talking to us, and he's that guy from Marvel, the colorist, and bench press. Sorry for the accent there, Josh. So this was really super intriguing, and we started talking to Chi, and were able to corral him into an interview in the closing moments of JoeFest 2024. Big tip of the hat and thanks to Jason Murrell of the Order of Battle podcast, who helped out trying to find a quiet space where we could record. And for having the patience to sit in the corner of the room and listen as we interviewed Chi. Now, Chi, aka Chia-Chi Wang, is from Taipei, Taiwan originally. He's a comic book creator, and in the early 90s, he worked on a freelance basis for coloring at Marvel Comics. Most significantly, he was coloring the final few issues on G.I. Joe with a run from 149 through to the final issue 155, and was also the colorist on the subsequent one-off G.I. Joe special, which was that previously unpublished Todd McFarlane issue. Following this, in the late 90s, he teamed up with fellow Marvel creator Benny Powell to form Bench Press Studios, which at one point planned to publish G.I. Joe and Transformers comics. The After Action Report Volume 2 has an interview with Benny Powell covering his side of the attempt by Bench Press to launch a G.I. Joe comic, and the art for that pitch is also available online. If you search for Bench Press G.I. Joe, you'll find it. So with that introduction done, let's go back to Mark, Tim, and Chi in a little room at the Marriott Convention Center at JoeFest 2024. Here we go.
We met 15 years ago at BotCon.
God, 15 years ago, BotCon, that's such a long time ago.
We talked for a half hour in the lobby.
Wow, that is a long time. I can't say I remember much because I met so many people that day. So, but it's good seeing you again.
We've just literally sort of bumped into you on the floor of JoeFest, and Josh Eggerbeen said, do you know who this is? You should talk to this guy. So it sounds like you've had two hats to your G.I. Joe career as a colorist, and then in bench press as well.
Yes.
Let's start.
Can you talk about getting to Marvel? You were an intern at Marvel, or you were a freelance color artist?
Well, I started out as an intern and eventually ended up being a colorist working for them. I was there from 1993 all the way to 2000. It's kind of what it is. You want a simplified story, I can give you that. Basically I went to the High School of Art and Design, and that school has an internship program with Marvel and DC Comics. And they basically, at the time I applied for, my grades were good enough, so I got into it. It was my senior year. I ended up working as an intern there. They liked me, and they actually had me back as a summer intern during that summer. And then afterwards, I graduated. I just said, I'm not going to go to college. they're gonna go straight work in the comic book industry because I already got a way in. So I just became the reason I became a colorist because that was the easiest job to get at Marvel Comics. You know, because you want to be a writer. Writer is the most difficult one. You have to try for years and years. If you ever see any Peter David interview, even he's like, yeah, he had to prove himself many times. Writing is the hardest. Then comes art. Part of the reason why art is hard is because you have to be fast enough to produce and competent enough to produce the consistent material. You know, they won't hand you a regular book. You know, either you're really good, but it takes you a long time to produce art, or you know you can't be consistent and get stuff in on deadline. So that's why art is difficult on that level. And there's a lot more people competing to do art. And to be honest, in the comic book industry, competing for art is the most people want to get into it because they want to draw comic books. Not that many people want to be writing comic books. If you can write, you want to write something else. You want to be writing for novels, you write for TV. It's true, right? You know, so in the comic book industry, everybody wants to be an artist, and that's much harder to get that kind of job. At the time, what happened was my parents were saying, if you can't get a job in the comic book industry, we're gonna have to send you back to college. So I was just willing to take any job that was coming my way, and colorist was the easiest. There was such a need for colorists at the Marvel because sometimes you have editorial assistant editors coloring comic book pages during lunchtime. Right. That's how much work was being processed during that period. So it wasn't that difficult to get coloring job. You just ask around and say, okay, well, I'll give you a chance. You know, if you know how to use a marker or you know how to paint.
Who taught you to color?
I had like real art teachers, beforehand.
I don't mean color theory. I mean technically 64 colors or 96 colors.
Okay, well, it's not that difficult because they give you a color guide. There's a color guide that gives you all the color coding, like 20% yellow, 10% red, and then 50% blue, and that's a color code there. So they give you a guide, and basically just when you color the page, you just kind of draw little pointers as this color is red 50%, yellow so much so, and all that.
Yeah. So this is still the era with the numbered coloring before.
Well, they give you free dyes too at Marvel Comics. So it was easy to do that, as long as you can. But then some people even had Copic markers too. You can do that as well, depending on whether you know how to use a brush or you just want to go with markers. So that wasn't difficult to secure that kind of job. Nobody really taught you anything. If you know anything about color, they give you a color guide. You look at it, go, okay, that's it. You're ready to go. Believe me, we had assistant editors who never know anything about art coloring comic book pages at the time. That was Marvel Comics during that time period. We used to call it the second golden age because there was just so much money involved. I mean, here's what it is. I started out, my coloring page rate started out being $16 a page. You color a page, turn it in, it's $16. I was immediately about a year later, I was making about $3,000 to $4,000 a month just coloring comic books without royalty. So imagine how much work I was doing a month. Yeah, but of course the other thing is with Marvel, whenever it's a rush rate, they give you they give you like a rate and a half, something like that. So quite often it's like this stuff has to come in. We'll give it to you today. You guys come back tomorrow. Yeah, so there was so much coloring work that a lot of times whenever it's a rush job, meaning, okay, they give you the work today, you got to come back tomorrow with it. They give you a rate and a half. So quite often, that happened too at Marvel. So I was making very good money just covering comic books. I was happy with that. At one point, like I said, when I was making $3,000 to $4,000, I was making more money than anyone in my family.
Were you going into Marvel every day? Were you working from home?
Working from home. But then whenever you're done, you bring the stuff in.
Okay, so you did not have a desk there?
No, but sometimes they call me and they say, okay, well, so-and-so assistant editor is out of the office this week. Why don't you come in and sit in for a few days and stuff like that? So I go in and they would, assistant editor stuff like, photocopies, checking for misspelled words and stuff like that, bring, paperwork from one office to another. So it wasn't difficult, but I did some, editorial work there too. They sometimes just needed extra help. Marvel was just busy, really busy during that time period. You used to go in, once a week, and you walk around the office. People be like, "Hey, Chi, do you have time? Do you want to do some work?" And they would just throw stuff at you. That's kind of how it was.
Had you read comics as a kid?
Yes, but I started out reading more, in Japanese manga comic books, and I really started reading like American comic books around third grade when Transformers came out. I was interested in that property. That's where I really started collecting Marvel comic books, but it was mostly Transformers based. And once in a while, when they used to have those commercials, G.I. Joe, find out in Marvel Comics, I would buy an issue of G.I. Joe too because of that. Those commercials did wonders for their sales. It's amazing how they can get you to buy a book just because of a 30-second commercial. But then it really was only my high school days when I was in my art class. I had other students that was buying stuff like Jim Lee's X-Men, Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man. That you're looking at the arts. That's when I started getting more into collecting American comic books. And of course, naturally, once you started buying a year or two of this stuff, and there was kind of all the best stuff at the time because it was the top talents, you want to go work for Marvel Comics. No problem with it. And because our school had an internship program with it, naturally I got in, and it was like a dream when you first got in working there. You're 18, you're out of high school, and you're like, I'm at Marvel Comics already.
I saw an early portfolio of yours at BotCon before we met. It was filled with Transformers drawings.
Yes.
And they were shiny.
Yeah.
They were rendered in a way that Transformers comics hadn't looked at Marvel.
Yeah.
So did you start drawing Transformers on your own? Did you become a really big Transformers fan? Because at Bench Press, you were going to draw Transformers.
Yes. What it is I had the interest as a kid, from third grade and on, ever since it came out in '84, that attracted me. So you were just always drawing stuff like that. And it never stopped. I still do Transformer work from time to time. But the reason you saw a lot of it during that time period was because we're trying to get the license from Hasbro. I was spending a lot of time doing design work and then fleshing out, visuals and trying out different techniques. Also learned Photoshop at the time. So I was doing a lot of experimental work to say, how can I combine a 2D drawing into a photograph and make it look somewhat believable? And it was just kind of trial and error. So I did a lot of that. It was also fun for me. I was like, okay, this is interesting. Nobody else is doing stuff like this. And I think nobody else is still doing, no one even else not doing stuff like this. And I was, and the thing is, I was someone who I guess because of my generation, I never got into social media that much. So even though I kind of work in the industry, I just enjoy, being sort of the side that nobody sees, kind of like coloring, all that kind of stuff. Later on, I worked for Viz and Tokyo Pop. I was doing a lot of the pre-press work. What a lot of people don't realize is there's a lot of money in that. A lot of people think you get into the industry and then you just draw comic books and that's a fun thing. It can make money. But the thing is, if you're talking about paying real rates, me making $3,000 to $4,000 is better than a penciler at the time. Penciler sometimes and if you're like being a penciler, you're probably getting like $50 to $75 a page. And you can only, at best, maybe draw about 20, 30 pages, a month versus coloring. There's just a lot more money. And the same thing with pre-press. Pre-press for Tokyo Pop and Viz was they give you Japanese comic book pages on digital files. You just go in and delete all the English text and even English sound effects, and then you put in, the Japanese text, and you put in the English text. At one point, I was making $10,000 a month doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is from cleaning up taking out the Japanese elements.
Were you born in New York?
No, I was born in Taiwan, but my family came to America in 1984.
Okay.
Yeah, we immigrated here.
When you were how old?
9 years old. Couldn't speak a single word of English at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, it's true. We arrived in America. About a week later, I was sent to, a local public school. This is New York too, and I went in not even able to say thank you or the ABC alphabets. That's how I started. And so it was difficult time period. But watching cartoons is kind of what I watched cartoons. I learned English that way, because
Now you know.
Yeah, now I know. Yeah, knowing is half the battle. But what's really interesting, people don't realize how smartly written those G.I. Joe Transformer cartoons were. Because I remember watching those cartoons. You have Transformer character Megatron going, destroy the Autobots, and you're like, what does the word destroy mean? I had to look it up in the dictionary and find out what that means. I remember that was one of the very specific word I had to figure out.
All right, so you're at Marvel.
Yeah.
And you're coloring a lot of pages.
Yeah.
For several years.
Yeah.
How do you meet Benny Powell?
Or is the next question, we're coloring at Marvel, some G.I. Joe work comes your
yes,
way.
yes.
Does that's just one of many kind of jobs in coloring that comes your way, or were you keen to?
Well, G.I. Joe is special to me because that was my first regular coloring job at Marvel. Okay. I think I got in, I think it's either 145 or 146. It's the cover, the red cover coming out holding up his fist, that kind of stuff. Because before I was just kind of getting maybe an issue here, maybe an issue there from somebody.
145.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But what but what it is, I knew G.I. Joe also had a huge editorial team change too at the time. Mike Lackey just got named the editor and put on that book. Before that, I think it was David Wohl. I think David Wohl left to go to Image. So Mike Lackey was given G.I. Joe. And I knew Mike Lackey, so he's like, hey, you want to color this comic book? Okay. I don't know what happened to the previous color, but I think that was probably also piecemeal at the time. Whoever was able to take the job. So you want to do it? I say, hey, yeah. I know the cartoon. I know these characters. So he handed me the book. And now I'll admit this one thing that you can take away as sort of a little Easter egg. If you look at the G.I. Joe comic book, how Hawk's hair turned from blonde to brown in that issue.
The show and the toy.
Well, what it is I asked the editor, I said, okay, I know the comic book Hawk has blonde hair, but in the cartoon I'm used to, he has black hair. So what do we do? He goes, well, let's just do it in brown. And that was it. And the reason the color changed because I asked a stupid question, But that's what it was. Like, okay, I'll just do that.
I remember the front cover, Hawk sort of is one of the front covers is Hawk sort of shot and he's brown hair.
And Lady J's holding
yeah.
An Andrew Wildman cover before.
That was before me. So, but like I said, there was a lot of confusion at that time because nobody wanted to work on G.I. Joe comic books.
Why did we know the answer, but we want to hear it from you? Why did no one want to work on G.I. Joe comics?
Most people get into Marvel Comics wanted to draw the main titles, X-Men, Spider-Man, the Hulk, and all that kind of stuff. A licensed book is just a sort of addition to whatever Marvel was publishing at the time. What's interesting is G.I. Joe and Transformers never ended up as special projects. Because there was a department called Special Projects, and what they used to do was like, if a cereal company says we want to have a little comic book, with Spider-Man featuring it, that's what Special Projects would handle.
Special Projects also did trading cards. Some of the
trading cards are different department.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did Special Projects do the annual magazines?
No, Special Projects dealt with any licensee coming in. People saying, hey, this is M&M. We want to feature Spider-Man, on our package, something like that. Special Projects handled that. If let's say, Captain Crunch Zero says, okay, we'll want a comic book with him and Spider-Man team up, Special Projects dealt with that. So it was always interesting that Marvel's, dealing with something like Ren and Stimpy, G.I. Joe Transformers, they were all treated as a normal book in editorial office.
Beavis and Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead was another one. Yeah. So I thought it was interesting. Those never end up special project, and they never kind of grouped them together at one point. Remember, they had Star Comic books. That was a line that just dealt with licensed products. But G.I. Joe Transformers were primarily part of the real editorial. They were just handed to different editors, and they would go from editor to editor. Like I said, nobody wanted it because part of it is everybody wants a real Marvel character. The other thing is then you have to deal with the company above, like Hasbro. That there'd be an in-between. Star Trek was notoriously difficult because not only do they need to get approval from Paramount, they have to get approval from every single actor who has their likeness in the book.
Or the actor's agent. Right?
Yes. And the one that they used to kind of tear their heads about was Patrick Stewart.
Ironically.
Yeah.
All right, so you had a pinup in an issue of Transformers.
Yeah, the last issue of that. Last issue of Generation 2. How
did that happen?
Well, what it was is I got to Marvel. Of course, I'm working as a colorist, but I always poke my head into G.I. Joe office. The Transformers office saying, hey, I got
Rob Tokar.
Rob Tokar at the time. Yeah, I say, hey, I draw Transformers show at the time. Of course, they wouldn't give me the book. I'm an untested artist, and they already have somebody locked in for that anyway. And originally I figured, if I'm here long enough, I'll get that book eventually. But that only ran for 12 issues. That was the end of that. But but at one point I said, yeah, why do you do a pinup for it? So I did the pinup. Originally it was going to appear as a full page thing, but then because the book was canceled, they just kind of, at the end, they took a few other other pen-up kind of, they kind of reduced the size, so it's just smaller, half an image down there. But I was still fine with it. It's just that I was hoping to take over the book at one point because I knew it ran long enough. Nobody wants to work on these books, so I'm just going to take it. That was kind of that's how it is. But back to G.I. Joe coloring. So I was offered to color the book, and God, I was real happy. This is it. Oh boy, G.I. Joe's been around for 10 years. I can. This is my regular bread and butter for the next 10 years. And little did I know, the book got canceled about 10 issues in. But here's the interesting thing. I was talking to some of the people out there yesterday, was that the word of cancellation came down really out of nowhere. And it came right after we finished 150, the big benchmark issue. I remember very specifically we were running late at the time because the art was always coming in late. There was problem, getting the stuff in on time. 155, about, I think, probably 8 to 10 pages. They had to call me in and says, you got to come into the office today because the pencils are arriving. Just color the pencils, so we can just start sending the stuff to the printer and everything. It was that much of a rush job. I think the inker went and probably picked up what some other inkers were. They were piecemeal together at the very last minute for that. So the book was running late. I remember we finished that. We got that out. And then I remember very vividly, I was in the office. I was walking to get something from the editor, and then there was the editor, Mike Lackey, sitting with Larry Hamador talking about it. I say, the book is running late. He goes, maybe we should put in some inventory issues, filling stories in between, and then you can just restart again in 155 and catch up. So that decision was made. I don't know how long it was that, maybe a month or so, but it was very shortly after that. Then we got the word Hasbro was canceling the book. I was told that. I was really surprised. And then, of course, for myself, I'm okay. My first regular book. I'm not suddenly had lost it. But then I was actually more worried about the storyline, because I was like, oh boy, in issue 150, you have like characters like Destro, Baroness, Billy, Zartan, brainwashed by Cobra Commander. And the Joes were kind of on the run from Cobra, chasing after him. And that was sort of a cliffhanger. And then Larry only had one issue to wrap up the book.
I have asked the head marketer at Hasbro at the time if Hasbro canceled G.I. Joe, the comic, or if Marvel canceled G.I. Joe, the comic, because of low sales.
Yeah.
His recollection is that Marvel canceled it because of low sales.
I think we were still doing about 60,000 at the time for G.I. Joe, somewhere in that number.
Okay.
I don't, but the word I got was, just Hasbro says we're done with it. Okay. So I don't know. I don't know the exact detail which was which, but I know it was the word just came down saying this is done.
Okay. I mean, the timing, the toy line was canceled soon after.
Right.
So if Marvel didn't cancel it, Hasbro would have sooner than later.
Right.
And also, I guess the sequencing of it, the fact that they were using up all of these inventory issues, made you wonder if there's something in the wind that they knew they had a finite amount of time.
But the thing is, I remember specifically they talk about let's catch up, and Larry, you pick up at 155. So I don't think Marvel, even if Marvel, I still think it was Hasbro. The word came down from Hasbro that was canceled, from what I remember. But this is 30 years ago. And I wasn't directly involved in that process. I just remember I got the word say, "Oh yeah, we're done with it. The book is canceled." But if you were asked me, I remember as Hasbro saying we don't want this anymore. And the thing is, they planned those few inventory issues because I saw the conversation of saying, "Larry, we need to catch up on this book. This book is running late." And Larry says, "Okay, we'll pick up at issue 155." So like I said, I was surprised when that was happening. I go, "Oh, how is he going to wrap up the story?" But then, to my surprise, Larry's last issue, 155, was a phenomenal closing with G.I. Joe storyline. Basically, he gave you the moral and the theme of what G.I. Joe is really about, rather than, okay, let's just do a big nuclear bomb and wipe Cobra out and that'll be the end of it. So I thought that was really smart, and have the character who never had a voice be able to speak, through a letter at the end to a kid talking about what it means to be a soldier and what all this is all about, what it stands for. I thought that was brilliant. And I remember even up in the Marvel, the bullpen, they were looking at that. Most of the time people don't look at G.I. Joe, but because of the last issue, some people were flipping through it. And I had people saying, this is a really good last issue with G.I. Joe. it was recognized even within the Marvel editorial department that this was well done. So so that was it, the end of that. But then what happened was they say, oh, we still had that Todd McFarlane inventory issue. So I was asked to do the coloring of the cover. Now, what's interesting, if you look at that cover, they were saying they were trying to cash off of Todd McFarlane because he was really getting really big out there with Spawn and Image. So they purposely drew Snake Eyes in that famous Spider-Man pose, crouched down. And I was told by the editor, saying, hey, you see there's the window back there, some grids, great. Make sure there's lighting come from. It's going to create a web pattern so we can kind of tell. That's why it looked like that. So the funny thing is, if you're saying they canceled the book from Marvel, but they still had the inventory issue, they still want to make a little bit more money off of, I don't know. It's really bizarre.
Mike Lackey said to me that the Todd McFarlane issue was like a Hail Mary. Like maybe that would, even after the fact, drum up more interest, but it didn't.
Maybe it was too. I think it was just done and done. I mean, also around that time was when Generation 2 was kind of closed off as well. I think Generation came and then it was also, was done around that period too. They ran it for a year and that was sort of the end of that. Right. And it was kind of weird how I got in, I was able to work on G.I. Joe, which I grew up in, and I kind of got involved a little bit with Transformers, which is really what I wanted to do. But that's a Marvel didn't have anything to do with it anymore after that.
So it's 1994. You've been coloring a bunch of books, and you continue to color a bunch of books.
Yeah.
Marvel's in bankruptcy soon after that.
Around 96, 97.
Okay, later. All right. Yeah. Do you meet Benny or Powell? When do you meet him?
Around that time period.
94.
Something like 94, 95, something like that. Good God, I can't remember exactly. He came in as an intern too. He was a college intern. I went in as a high school intern. So there are two different kind of interns, at the time period.
So he was doing, college interns were doing different tiers of work?
Well, college interns, they usually stick them with one specific editorial department, as opposed to a high school intern, we're just kind of out there. Whichever editor needed help, we go help them. That's kind of how it is. And that's how I met a lot more people because of that. And ended up working at Rob Tokar's office, I think, for about a week too at the time period, because they had an assistant editor being out of the office. Quite often, if somebody's out of the office, they'd be like, okay, can you fill in? Just come in and take care of some miscellaneous work. We're never given any heavy lifting stuff. We're not calling up writers on the phone and all that kind of stuff. We're calling artists. Most of the time, it's just package come, make sure count the pages are here, get some photocopies done, and then give work to whatever needs to be handed out. So it's like, on some level, editors are very much like glorified cop, traffic cops. Right? We stuff come in, we should make sure they go out on time, shift them around.
So you meet Powell,
yeah,
and the two of you realize you have these shared interests, these overlapping interests. Yeah. And he had been making a comic.
No, he never made any comic.
Who did Simpleton High?
That was me.
You'd been
making I've always the one that's been drawing and writing.
Okay.
He just writes. He has no art skill.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's pitching stories to editors at Marvel. He got a story turned into an issue of What If.
I think so. Yeah, I think he was doing something like everybody can pitch.
So how did the two of you? How do we get from you meet him, you get to know him, to the two of you form a company?
Okay. Well, here's what it is. Most of the time, when you're an intern, you talk to other interns. It's you're kind of on that same social hierarchy in the editorial department. Editors talk to editor, assistant editor talks to editor, interns talk to interns. So he's there, I'm there. We're just kind of talking. He likes G.I. Joe, and he understands a little bit of Transformers. That was kind of the other way for me too. I like Transformers. I understand somewhat G.I. Joe. So we're just kind of talking. Benny's I'll give him the credits. He is a fairly smart guy. So a lot of stuff he says, okay, I like your idea. And we're saying there's some common sense. He understood writing better than I did at the time, because you just want to draw books, So we met that way. We talked about it. And how we really collaborated for the first time was there was a company called Academy Comics.
Academy Comics.
Yeah, Academy Comics.
Okay.
Yeah, publisher. Tiny company. They had the Robotech license at the time. They had it for a brief period of time, maybe for several years. I don't know for how long. And Benny ended up somehow connecting with them, talking to them, and they're saying, "Hey, we'd like you guys to do a book." So Benny says, "Hey, you can finally draw a comic book now instead of just being Marvel doing cards." I say, "Okay, sure, I'll do that." It's some sort of an anime manga style book. I say, "Yeah, your style fits that." Sure, no problem. So he got the job, got him to agree to do the work. Benny was writing the script, sort of basically we got Robotech the movie as an adaptation we're doing. So he was doing the script adaptation, and I just handled the art. And we worked with the first time, and for the most part, it was like, okay, we were kind of on the same wavelength of how we communicated with each other back and forth on the project. So I say, yeah, this is good. We did Robotech. But what's funny was almost as soon as we got the job, they approved it. They suddenly says, okay, Academy says we're losing the Robotech license. So originally it was supposed to be spending 2 months with each book. Ended up, I think at the time it was cut down to maybe at best 3 months. We lost a whole month, and maybe only about 2.5 months left. So it was just a mad dash to get that book done. I put a lot of effort into it, but a lot of time you don't have time to put in effort to that book. A lot of the art just looks sloppy because you just have to get stuff done. So for the first book, about 5 or 6 pages were actually drawn on the way to the FedEx office to mail it off. That's how bad it was. Yeah. That's a completely different story. One day if I tell that, it's a super fun, interesting story. But that was what it was like to work on your first project. So in a way, it was a disaster, but I always have a great story to tell after that, So we worked together well on that, and then Benny had an idea called Warrior's Way, because he said he wanted to do characters with battle armor, and I'm pretty good at drawing mechanical stuff. So he said, well, let's team up. I said, sure, why not? That sounds pretty fun. But I said, I can't draw the book. Maybe I'll hire somebody else. So we did find an artist at the time to be the official penciler on the book. And for the most part, when we first started off, it was fine. He did the writing. I managed the art in terms of storytelling, layouts, and the artist we hired, Jesse Chen, at the time drew the book, and I did the coloring. So it was kind of a simple process. We worked out well. Originally, he wanted to pitch the book to Academy, but Academy, I think, was having problems of their own, losing the license and maybe having some financial trouble in the background too that I wasn't aware of. But looking back, that's probably what it was. So they didn't want to take it. I said, and I have money because I make so much money from all the time. That money saved up. So I said, okay, I'll put the money down for it. Let's do it. Why not? The industry also is going through a massive change. Where a lot of these creators, where we talk about Jim Lee, McFarlane, Rob Liefeld left to create Image, and then from that you also have moved sort of the hot, superhero chick movements with the, like She, Kabuki, that kind of stuff spawning out.
Bad girl
comic. That's the term. I forgot. That's what it was. Bad girl comic that was getting popular. So there's a lot of these independent movements at the time, and we thought, okay, let's just go out there and do that. What was really unfortunate was when we started doing that. About a year later is when the whole industry just completely collapsed. I think it was now 97 we decided to go on and do this. It wasn't that fast. 97 was when we decided to go because Marvel filed for bankruptcy. I said, okay, so we were losing a lot of work. You were getting less and less work. So I said, okay, let's go on and try this thing.
But you're still coloring for Marvel.
Yeah, but it was a lot less.
Okay.
I wasn't making the same kind of money that I was. You go in and say, hey, you guys got work? Sorry, that was kind of where it was. So we decided to go on and try this because, you're not getting work from Marvel and DC that much. Might as well, got some money, try and see if it happens. And so it was 97 when we decided to go do this. But then I think around 98, when we first started putting out Warrior's Way, is when the industry started rapidly collapsing. And we just kind of got caught in that cycle, got pulled down, But right after we put out the first Warrior's Way, Benny was like, hey, how about let's try and go get Transformers and your license now. My argument at the time was, do you think this is too soon? We just only done one book. But he was very gung-ho about it. Benny is always like that. I don't want to go do it, even though when you're not even ready to do that. But I say, okay, why not? Let's give it a shot. We're out here anyway. And the thing is, you also have to, because the industry is kind of on a downward spiral, I don't think anyone else was even attempting to do something like that. So we thought maybe it was an opening to try it. So he contacted. He was the one that called up Hasbro. He did most of the talk. He's a pretty good, he's a pretty good talker. I let him do that. I wasn't this good at communicating at the time. I still am a little tongue-tied from time to time, but he was very, very good at that.
You were both in New York.
Yes.
At the time.
Yes, around that time period.
So he telephoned Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Do you remember who he talked to or who you worked with?
I can't say remember. I may have the paperwork somewhere, but it was a lady we talked to who was in licensing.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lady that he talked to, and they agreed to meet with us. It wasn't that fast. He called them, we talked, we sent some stuff back and forth. I think maybe about a month or so, or maybe even 2 after that, we got a meeting to go meet with them. But the meeting, what was interesting was they told us, we have somebody from the video game department doing Centipede. They want to talk to you. So we had 2 other guys, sitting there talking to us. They want a Centipede comic book.
Because Hasbro had just bought a bunch of video games from Activision.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so they were interested in promoting that.
Well, it was the 2 guys from that department that was interested in that. Okay. The licensing had no interest at all. Okay. It was kind of a sign like they hijacked the whole meeting. They came in on that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we were talking to that lady in licensing the whole time. She's like, okay, send stuff. Okay, what's our meeting? But almost like a day or so before the meeting, we were informed that somebody from that department wanted to talk to us because they heard about this thing. They're doing comic books. They wanted when we sit down and talk to them, they wanted a comic book for Centipede. And the funny thing is, when you talk to them, you realize they have no idea the production process of comic books. They were saying, we were asking them, when's your game coming out? They were like, next month. And we're like, we cannot produce a comic book and come out next month with you. And it was back and forth on that, even that few hours we were talking to them. Because they kept thinking, you want this license, then we got to take Centipede and put out the comic book. And we're just like, I don't think we're able to do that.
But you guys did take Centipede.
No, we didn't take Centipede.
Okay.
We didn't take Centipede.
Okay.
We didn't. Absolutely, we did not.
Okay.
Because this is what happened. We had the meeting. We're just like, okay. It didn't come. I don't want to say it came to a standstill. It was just like we didn't get anything approved at that point. So we drove back. I think it was a day or 2 after we got back, we got the call from the licensing department saying, those guys, they don't want to do the comic book. The Centipede people don't want to do the comic book anymore, so we can give you the license now. Oh. So Centipede came and went. There was no development. There was no money, nothing. We didn't sign anything on the dotted line. Okay. So they were agreed to do that with us. And Benny was real happy. He said, okay. But there was no contract. There was nothing yet. But Benny's like, okay. Then we got to start preparing stuff on our end. So he started putting a website together to prepare for the announcement. I said, Benny, why are we preparing for this when we haven't gotten any paperwork signed? He goes, I just want to get stuff ready. He didn't know how to operate, putting up a website properly. He designed it and it went live literally that night.
Oh. Yeah.
Hasbro saw it and says, we can't, why are you doing this? We can't give you a license. And that was the end of that. That was how it really ended.
So all of the materials that exist out there, the Larry Hama sort of proposal, the Ron
Lim, 4 pages, penciled ink, colored letter.
That was all prepared as part of the pitch for Hasbro. As this,
we put all that stuff together before the meeting. Mm-hmm. We met with Hasbro, we showed them all that stuff was ready. Like I said, because of Centipede, everything was held up. But it was like a day or 2 later, they says that department didn't want to do anymore because they realized there's no way we can produce the book within a month to get it into the market. So it was those guys who wanted to put a comic book out, and they found that they couldn't do it, and they pulled out. Then they say, okay, we'll give you the license. I say, oh, great, okay. And Benny says, let's start getting stuff ready for a website, announcement. But the website went live that night as he was putting that website together.
All right. So Benny said to me that he reached out to Larry Hama. Mm-hmm. Hama was interested.
Yes, that was before we went to see Hasbro.
Okay.
Yeah, Hama was definitely interested. Okay. Yeah.
And he reached out to Simon Furman and Andrew Wildman.
Yes.
And there were going to be 4 books, maybe even 5. Do you remember the breakdown?
Well, what it is I will be doing one of them for sure.
Transformers.
Transformers.
Generation 1.
Drawing would be
not Generation 1.
Okay.
Yeah, we were going to continue where the the cartoon continuity where it left off. That was our real goal.
A TV show?
No, not a TV show. A comic book series that really picked up from there.
Oh, you wanted to pick up after issue 12 of Generation 2?
No, I wanted to pick up after season 4 of Transformers.
Pick up the cartoon in comic form.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Because I always thought that was compared to the Transformer comic at the time, it was the superior storyline.
Okay.
The comic book was always a mess. So I just thought and the thing is, most people are more familiar with Transformers through the cartoon than they were through the comic book. So I said, let's pick that one because that's more mainstream. We can get more audience that way. Simon Furman and Andrew Wellman, we want to get them on to do Beast Wars because that was kind of happening at the time. We know there's a fandom. We didn't want to drop that fandom. And because Simon already did writing for some of the Beast War cartoon episodes, we figured that would be a perfect shoe-in. And we also felt Andrew Wellman's artwork really would have done really nicely for Beast War as well. That kind of organic look that Beast War going for. So that's what that book was. Transformers, we had another one, was more like we call it Transformers Showcase, but that wasn't going to be a regular series. That was going to be more like, okay, we have a good idea of a story. Let's use that to tell it once in a while. Not so much of an annual, but it was just more of a way to do shorter little stories. Like anyone with an idea can pitch and write that book was kind of what we wanted. So because I go, there's so many different fandom out there. There's the fandom of the TV show like me. There's the fandom of the comic book continuity. There's also fandom of Japanese Transformers. So at least let's have a thing called Transformer Showcase that can do individual little stories, so anyone can kind of fill that gap.
It's a bit like Legends of the Dark Knight from DC.
I guess
rotating art.
Right. You can say it's kind of like that. So that was really about placing that fandom. But what I really want to do was, I said, I used to tell this to Benny. I said, what was kind of really sad about watching these cartoons back then was that these things were with you for about almost 3 years of your life, whether it's G.I. Joe and Transformers. You used to get them at home, you turn on TV, and then one day they just stopped. You come home, you watch the last episode, and you tune in the next day, it's a rerun, and we just rerun forever. And I said, let's see what happened to these worlds. Let's continue from there. Let's really try to do something with these characters and tell something meaningful. What happened to, after Optimus Prime came back? What happened after they did that whole Headmaster saga? Well, let's continue from there. That's what I want to do with the TV continuity, And because we also both agree, because that was the Transformer front. And then with the G.I. Joe front was that we both agreed the comic book story was a far superior one compared to the TV show. So that's where we want to go. So we contacted Larry immediately. I have no problem with that. Benny's a fan of Larry, and I never really read much of the G.I. Joe books when I was working on the coloring. I just colored from that point on. I read some of this stuff. But when we were out there trying to put these projects together as proposal to pitch to Hasbro, Benny says, well, you're going to be, dealing with Hasbro now, all that kind of stuff, and you could even be editing some of this stuff. Why didn't you read through G.I. Joe? He just basically gave me his whole collection of 150 issues. And I read that in 2 weeks. I read the entire run of G.I. Joe in 2 weeks. And I became a fan of Larry Hama immediately after that. I thought it was just a superior writing every way. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, when we do G.I. Joe, let's do that continuity. And the thing we did was, Benny knows, and I know, him and I could not write G.I. Joe better than Larry Hama. Mm-hmm. Don't also bring another writer in to try to write G.I. Joe. Just get Larry Hama. So we agreed on that 100%. And what we both liked was, okay, Larry kind of ended that book in sort of a weird time jump. But we also don't want to go back and fill in that time period between 150 and 155. Because we thought it's like, okay, obviously we already know somehow maybe Cobra was defeated or whatever, the Joes have to shut down base. But let's just continue from that point on. Because between the time of G.I. Joe ending publication and when we're going for it, I think there was also a 5-year gap at that point. Mm-hmm. So it made more sense. Let's just continue forward instead of going backward. Politics was different. The military aspects of America, what we're dealing with at the time, was different. Let's just move forward instead of trying to go back and fill in that time period. Is kind of what we thought. So we talked to Larry about it, and Larry gave his pitch, and I thought it was fantastic. When I got it, I couldn't believe it. Mainly because 150 ended with Joe's folding the flag and closing out the base. And Larry literally reopened it with them going back to put up the flag. I thought there was something very moving about that. Very patriotic, too.
So Ron Lim drew those four pencils.
Yes, we contacted Ron Lim. Ron Lim was going to be the regular penciler on the book if we got it. Because we knew Ron Lim, too, personally. Benny got in contact with him, and I worked with him because I did some coloring for some of his books, too, at the time, I think. So, because I was doing a lot of 299 projects at the time, after G.I. Joe. So we wanted Ron Lim because we thought he was, so first of all, he's someone he can deliver on deadlines. There's no problem. And we just thought he could bring a good storytelling aspect to the story. Really what it is. He's also a name. So it's okay, let's get him. Let's get some real names for G.I. Joe. That's what we wanted.
And there'd be another G.I. Joe book.
There was the other one was G.I. Joe Strike Force. And that was something we talked about too. We say, okay, there's so many characters in G.I. Joe. And you even notice that in the regular Larry Hama continuity originally, was that there were so many of them, some of them never get used. Like they would appear for a few issues and never see them again. So for the Strike Force idea was, okay, for the main book, let's have a team of almost, I think, 12 or something like that. Set it at that number, easy to manage. We pick these characters individually for that. But for Strike Force, would be a revolving door of other characters that we don't use in the main book that can come in and fill the gap. So fandom, it's like Showcase. Fandom is not left out.
And Larry would also write that book?
I think Larry can write some of the stories if he wants, and I think Benny wanted to do some of that too. So I think that's fine, because I think as long as and the other thing that this is why we wanted to do Showcase and to Strike Force, that we know how to deal with Hasbro in terms of licensing. They always have some weird demands. If they have demands, we throw it onto those books. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, oh boy, we got to feature a new G.I. Joe tank now. Don't use that in the main storyline. Let Larry continue doing whatever he's doing, and let's use Showcase to feature that toy figures. Kind of what it's kind of what we think about with Strike Force and the Transformer Showcase.
This timeline from when the two of you started developing your plan and calling people and calling Hasbro, and that meeting, and then the website. Snafu. How long is that whole span?
I think it was 3 or 4 months, something like that.
Very short.
Yeah.
And including Ron Lim penciling those pages and
Well, Ron Lim can pencil super fast.
And Harry Candelario inking them and someone coloring them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there was no contract.
No, everyone just tried to decide. No contract from Hasbro. We all did that on specs.
Okay.
Yeah. I even pitched in and did some artwork and the coloring. All those was just done out of our own desire to keep these things going.
You did some Transformers artwork.
Yes.
Has that ever been publicly seen?
Oh, it's been thrown out there, afterwards. Yeah. I still have it with me.
So did you and Benny have a conversation when Hasbro walked away after the website went live? Did you have a discussion?
Well, I don't know if it was just a discussion. I think there was very unhappy, angry words being thrown about too. I said, why Benny did you put up the fucking website, before we were even ready? Oh, blah, 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 whatever. But it happened to happen. And part of it was, I think it was better. In hindsight, I think it was better because we were probably not prepared to run all these books. Benny had bigger ideas. He wanted to do all 5. I said, okay, well, let's go along with this. Let's see what happens. But then shortly after, like I said, the entire industry collapsed, like completely collapsed afterwards.
Bench Press also published 2 more issues of Warrior's Way.
We published up to 3.
Okay. And
we kind of ran out of money at that time.
Were those issues 2 and 3, was that after the Hasbro deal fell apart?
That was always being worked on. So I don't remember but I know it did happen a little bit afterwards. Okay. But the thing is, all those things we were just running things, just let it happen as it is at the time. I was doing Warrior's Way, focus on that. Benny was contacting Hasbro, if I need to devote some time to have some artwork being put into that, I did that. And so, it's honestly, it's a blur right now how it all happened because so much was happening at the time. There was a lot of ambition. And I think there were a lot of bigger dreams than what we could really handle at the time. But of course, because we worked at Marvel, and especially, this is something I never learned until years later when I started doing my own books, that Marvel and DC both made it look easy. because their system and infrastructure is in place. You need an artist, just call an artist, and it wasn't, and money wasn't even that big of a deal, to be honest. You know how much you have to pay them. So we have money set aside for that. But it really was the process of producing comic book that we didn't really have a full grasp upon. It's kind of like why I was saying, when I was at Marvel, why there were assistant editors that were coloring during lunchtime was because, boy, if anything we can't do was running late, there's at least a bunch of other people we can call on to hand the work off to. But when you go and do full comic book production and try to hit a monthly deadline, just two people managing a company was not going to make it happen.
And from Benny Powell's interview with the After Action Report book, he's sort of, acknowledging that things fell apart because of the things that got out there in the public domain before Hasbro had properly approved it all. And then
he never admits that he was the one that made it happen. He'll never admit
it happened. And then sort of acknowledging there's some, there's sort of disaster recovery that needs to happen here to kind of patch over things and get it back on track. But then he has a car accident, which sort of takes him.
That has nothing to do with anything. He had a car accident, but that has nothing to do with it. Because you have to understand, I was the one that was footing most of the bills for the company. So any investor pulling, I know that the report says investor pulled out. There was no investors. It was investor. It was me footing all the bill. Okay? So whatever he told you after that is a complete fabrication.
Wow.
Yeah.
So no venture capital.
No.
Okay.
Me, I was the one footing down all the money. He couldn't get money from anywhere else. He had venture capital later on for other stuff, but not for those books.
But in terms of trying to patch things over with Hasbro, try and save it.
There was no saving from that. I don't know how much. I don't think even he made any more efforts after it. Because what it is also we were running out of money. I was running out of money. So there's no way, even if we contacted Hasbro afterwards, there's no way to continue that. We would have to take out loans to make that happen.
You continued to color at Marvel through
around 2000. Yeah, I think the last one I did was something like Secret. There was a book called, I think, Secret 3000 was the last one I got. But like I said, I was getting less and less and less work from Marvel.
When did you and Benny split?
We didn't split until much, much later because we were still kind of, I mean, a lot of things happened. I never really 100% blame him for that stuff early on. I just said, okay, he didn't have an experience running a business. I didn't have an experience running a business. We're also hit with the whole industry just falling apart left and right toward around 98, 99. Marvel filed for bankruptcy in 97. By 98, we had waves and waves of layoffs happening in Marvel Comics. DC, I think, was also run into trouble. You see a lot of these independent comic publishers were kind of disappearing too around that time period.
Devils do. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah.
Other like Milestone and Ultraverse had created the universes 93, 94 after Image, and they all contracted.
They all contracted.
3 or 4 years later. Dark Horse's Comics Greatest World.
Yeah. See, if Benny was more saying, okay, the industry was just bad for us at the time, that's the truth. Like, originally I had, if coloring was still good, I could have used that to keep funding the books, but coloring was drying up too on all different ends. That's also why we try to go on and do Robotech for Academy was that, okay, maybe it's another way to make some money now to do the transition. But there was just less and less work going around that time period. I mean, when Marvel was filed for bankruptcy, there were a lot of also artists that just left the industry after that. Just major, like Harry Candelario left the industry completely after that. He sold all his art to and got rid of all that stuff, and moved out of New York with his wife to be with their relatives. I think somewhere in Maryland or something like that. So a lot of people just left the industry. The industry literally just emptied out almost overnight.
What did you do next?
Well, for a while, I couldn't find anything in New York. The New York. What's funny was, for a while I just sold stuff on eBay because when I was making money, I was buying a lot of Transformers, all that kind of stuff, and different other collectibles. And when you have money, you started selling them. And eBay was coming around that time period. Right. But then New York had September 11 happen. And literally there was like 2 years I had no work. I would actually have to work at Toys R Us for a few months at one point just to get by. You were applying for jobs, but there was no jobs in New York. to be handed out. And I was still keeping in touch with Benny, and he got into marketing at one point, and then he moved to Orlando, Florida, and he was like, hey, he goes, I found some people with money here that can probably help us redo comic books and all that kind of stuff. But what he was building at the time was a marketing company. He was like, hey, why don't you come and help out? We can eventually the comic books again. I said, okay, sure, why not? Like I said, there wasn't any strong animosity toward him at the time period. Mainly because when the industry fell apart, you saw so many people fell apart. So it wasn't like, well, it was your fault. It was just the whole industry was just a mess at the time.
Are you saying that later on you realized that you were more disappointed in Benny?
Oh, because there were things that really jolted you awake. Like, oh, wait a minute, there was something wrong with the way he operated. So, so I moved to Orlando because also there was just nothing in New York at that time. And I thought, okay, you come into Orlando, everything is cheaper. Living costs is cheaper. Get out of New York. Otherwise, I would still be living, literally living in my parents' basement that time period. So I said, let me give it a shot and go to Florida. He also got me a job doing some coloring work on this children's book that was produced by Mark McKenna at the time, and that paid me $8,000 as the money to kind of move and then try to restart out here. So Benny was still funneling money to me too. We didn't have a bad relationship at the time. He was still kind of looking out for me. He always told me anytime he needed art, he could call me and says, hey, I can give you a few $100 here and there. Sure, no problem. So eventually I came out here to do the marketing company with him. But what I really saw that kind of started jolting me awake was he didn't know anything about marketing company, kind of like he didn't know anything about running a comic book company. And he wants to run the show. And at one point, he says, okay, we want to see what can get business from places like banks or any company that issues cards like this, a plastic, like a credit card type of card. So he goes, I found out in America, we produce them about 50 cents a piece. But he goes, I think if we go foreign, if we go to contact somewhere in China, we can get them cheaper. So why don't you start looking for these sources for me because you can speak Chinese? So I said, okay, let me call them up. So I called up, I would just look up online to see if there's any company that produces it operating out of China, and I would call them. So remember, he said it costs about 50 cents a piece to produce for most American companies. I found the company that says we can do it for 25 cents. I said, well, that's pretty good, right? I told Benny, I found it for 25 cents. He goes, I think that's still too high. Can you bring it lower? So I negotiated, got it down to 15 cents. Gee, that's still too much. That's still too high. And then I finally found someone that says we can do it for 10 cents. Gee, it's still too expensive. And I was having meetings telling or giving him all these numbers I got. It was me, him, and a real investor that was investing into his marketing company. I said, Benny, 10 cents. He goes, it's still too much. Even an investor says, why is that too much? Why is everyone else can sell this for 50 cents and we can grade it down to 10? You still think it's too much? And Benny just climbed up and shut up. That's when I realized there's something seriously wrong here. Seriously wrong here, And that's why I go, okay, I need to start distancing myself from him. Because he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And he doesn't even understand numbers in that weird way. How can you tell me, okay, every other company pays 50 cents to have this done, printed and everything. I was able to find a company that can do all of this, even mag strip and everything. Bring it down to 10 cents, and he still says that's too expensive to do. We could have started sending people out to get business already from these places. Why did he act upon that? Why is he telling me to call these companies and still try to bring the numbers lower? That's when I go, okay, well, I can't be around this guy. He doesn't understand business. He doesn't understand number. Got to pull away from him. And he didn't want to leave. He started making that. When you wanted to break away from him, he started making threats. Oh, gee, if you leave, you'll never work in comic books ever again. That kind of stuff was thrown out. I'm like, I was working comic book before I met you. What the heck are you talking about? So he started threatening me and stuff like that. That's why I go, we're done and done. You don't threaten me. That's really what it is. Yeah.
That's 2003, 2004?
About 2004, 2005, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you stay in Orlando?
I did, because I liked Orlando.
How's the weather compared to New York?
Much better. Well,
how's the weather compared to Taiwan?
Well, everything is better in Orlando, to be honest. Well, here's why I decided to move to Orlando. The first time I went to visit Benny there, before I even decided to make the move, I got to Orlando. I go to a 7-Eleven convenience store. Immediate store closed. Hi, welcome. How can I help you? You don't get that in New York. In New York, if they don't curse you out, it's already a good greeting. So that's why I go, Florida. I go, well, Florida's real nice. I think the people here are nice. I think they're cheaper, so that's why I moved on over there.
And how long did you stay?
Oh man, I moved there 2003. I left 2022. 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Like basically, just my second life was in New York. I left New York, and then my second life was in Florida for about 20 years.
Where are you now?
In California.
I hear the weather and the produce is good in
the weather is nice, the food is good, but the gas prices is insane.
Okay.
Yeah. So but I went out there because I have my own comic company, and it just got to a point I realized if I need to grow and then bring some of this stuff into the public, I need to make connection with Hollywood and the film and the animation industry, so we can see if I can get some of those projects growing. Because I know in Florida is basically a retirement and a tourism economy. There's no telling, there's no this kind of interest over there. So I go, okay, then maybe it's time to go out there. And
tell us about your comics company.
Oh, comic company is called Excel Comics. I literally registered it back in 2010. And originally I registered as a company mainly because I need to hire artists. I need to, of course, you got take care of taxes and all that kind of stuff. So it was really done just to file for taxes correctly and all those things. And first we were doing a very small project. Originally I was trying to develop Christian comic books. I go, that's an interesting market. Nobody's really tapped into that. So let me try that. Then from that point on, we end up with more and more books slowly, throughout the years. The second major project I decided to go and create was Captain China. Yeah, and that really happened because I took a trip out to China in 2008. And I saw how their economy was growing, rapidly growing. But what was interesting was, I was walking around the streets of Shanghai, and you see like huge skyscraper being constructed. You see all the construction crane, all that kind of stuff. But then as you walk into little alleyways, you saw like vendors selling bootleg DVDs. But all the stuff they're selling is American movies, and all the stuff they put out prominent was like Spider-Man, Batman, that kind of stuff. So I go, okay, they want American level entertainment. They want superhero stuff, but nobody's really developing anything like that. So I say, okay, let me do something called Captain China. Let me use that name because it's a catchy name. Get people's attention. It feels like there's some controversy to that. I can use that to do a sort of a satire parody of Captain America. Meaning, of course, we know the American superheroes always choose justice the American way. But I say, how about we flip it on its head, something like choose justice the communist way? That'd be an interesting take on the subject matter. So there's a little bit of satire in there, Captain America, but at the same time, let's also try to develop a real Chinese superhero that kind of deals a little bit with their social political background, what it's like to have a superhero now in China, like caught between traditional hardcore communism and modern day capitalist development. I think that's an interesting backdrop to tell a story like that. So we spent a great deal of time working on that project, from probably around 2012 is when I first launched it. Got a lot of fanfare at the time because it was such a unique, title.
Here or there?
Everywhere.
Published here.
Oh yeah, even CNN called me at one point and said, we'd like to ask you a few questions about that. And over there, it was just huge news because somebody created something called Captain China, and nobody knew who created it at the time. It just came out one day.
How many issues, how many graphic novels have you published? How many employees do you have? How big is the company?
Okay, well, in terms of Captain China, it was planned to be a 12 books, 12 book arc to complete the first arc. So it's kind of like individual Marvel comic size for 12 issues, and then it was collected into 2 volumes, as Captain China collection. They're each 200 pages each. originally we were trying going the digital route. So we put it on Kindle and tried all of that, but sales digital comic books never did that well. So it's only in between the last 2 years, we decided to go into hardcover, printed book publishing is kind of what we're going through right now. Employees, I would say just me and another business partner of mine right now. We're basically just running the company on our own. And all the artists, I'm just kind of freelancing, outsourcing the stuff out to. And I think I got about probably 6 or 7 artists on hand.
Are you writing and drawing any of these books?
Captain China, I'm doing the writing, but the artwork is done by a Hong Kong comic artist. He comes from the background doing martial arts comic book. Okay. So it's very interesting. Early on, I was trying to do more superhero stuff and a lot more technological based stuff. But I found out he wasn't very good at handling that. So as the story progressed, I kind of started cutting down on the sort of like what kind of specific gun types they use, what kind of jets flies across the sky, to just Captain China fist punching the other villain. It became more of that to get around his shortcomings.
Does Excel have other properties?
Yes, we have another one called Oni Riser. That's something I write and draw myself. It's basically an anime style comic book, and it deals with the Japanese mythology of Onis. So they're demon ogre kind of stuff. But I was kind of bringing that sort to American audience. So I was putting more of a sci-fi spin to it. Instead of mythological creature, they have more of a technological based background for them. So I was doing that. We also have a book called Scarlet Scar, which is a vampire comic book. And it's really set in the medieval time about a knight that's hunting down vampires that kind of killed his loved one. A little more of a tragic love story. I want to try something like that. I have another one that's in the process of being worked on because the artist is kind of back and forth on me. It's called Happy Fun Time Zombie Apocalypse Girls. Now, it was really developed when we had stuff like Walking Dead and all those zombie books. I said, well, let's do one which is 5 female characters trying to survive during a zombie outbreak. And then basically, we picked such a catchy name because it was basically going to be 5 archetypes of kind of male fantasy. I have a redhead, a blonde, a brunette, an Asian lady, and they kind of filled in all those sort of man's fantasy occupational position. Like one's a bride, one's a cop, and one's a cheerleader, and one's a waitress, that kind of stuff. And they just so happened during a zombie outbreak, they were kind of brought together to fight zombies. So I thought it was kind of a fun, you can say it leans a little bit toward the bad girl comic, but it's a little bit more, it's a little less on the heavily leaning on showing sexual appeal, but more like, almost, I found an artist that draws Disney style. So it'd be funny, I'd say it'd be fun to do a Disney style kind of comic with 5 girls fighting zombies. And that's kind of what it was.
This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
So much.
Well, thank you for even spending the time with me. I don't think anyone even care about these old stories I had.
How did you hear of JoeFest? Where did you drive in or fly in from?
Okay. Well, I found out about JoeFest over 5 years ago. It was a G.I. Joe sort of like a little meetup over there back then in Orlando in the Acme comic book store. And I was there, and people were like, "Oh, we're going up to JoeFest this coming month or so, something like that." Or in June, something like that. I heard about it. I go, "Oh yeah, I'm interested in going." It's kind of G.I. Joe, because G.I. Joe was just kind of start coming back, during that time. It was like with the classifieds and all that kind of stuff. It's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm interested in going there." But then I forgot what something happened. I couldn't go. And then I said, "Okay, I'll go next year." And then the following year, my business partner had something else going on that weekend. I had to be with him, so I couldn't come out. And then the following, I said, "Okay, finally, I'll go the year after that." And then that was the year when I decided to sell my house and move out of Orlando. So I was busy packing up when JoeFest is happening. Then I moved out up to New York to stay with my parents for a while before figuring out what to do. So I was up in New York for a year. And then last year I moved out to California. So I'm just so far away from Georgia. I just didn't think I would ever come back again. But then just so happened this summer, I won the local art school in Orlando that I did some teaching for many years ago. They needed some help for summer camp. So I said, "Would you be willing to come back during the summer, for 2 months to kind of help us out?" I said, "Yeah, okay, sure, why not?" I can also check up on some of my friends back over here and all that. So I decided to come, and then literally about a week ago, I was like, okay, I have this week off from the school. I'm not teaching summer camp. Well, is anything interesting going on? I look online, go, "Oh, JoeFest is happening. I can finally make it after 5 years."
So you drove up from Orlando.
Yeah, drove up from Orlando. So it was a last minute decision because I found out about the show just a week ago.
It might be good that you waited so many years because the show has only gotten bigger.
Oh yeah,
5 or 6 years ago, it was a great show, but it was much smaller.
Right.
You're still a G.I. Joe and Transformers fan? You still
follow I think
toys, movies, shows.
Oh yeah.
comics?
Well, it's funny. I met Pixel Dan out on the front yesterday. I was just kind of talking. I say, because I'm not a big He-Man fan, but usually watching his toy review makes me want to get some of those He-Man toys, especially the modern stuff. I was just talking about it. I say, it's fascinating because he recently put out a video saying, because of the huge number of He-Man figures that Mattel is putting out, there's only a certain number left before they complete the original line. And I told him, I said, what's interesting is I noticed even with both Transformers and G.I. Joe, the way Hasbro's putting them out, it's almost close to finishing those original lineup too. I said it's weird. It's like all these companies are suddenly rushing to kind of capture this nostalgia much more than they ever did, and because it's finally giving people the product they want, the way we want them, the way they look. They look like cartoons, the way that we see them back then. Yeah. And I tell them the only thing I wish is I wish they did this 10 years ago. First of all, it'd be cheaper to buy them. Second of all, I have more money back then to throw around because now you're getting into an age you're like the money goes everywhere else, but in collecting now.
Right.
Because one of the reasons I'm back in Orlando is I will have a property over there. I go check on the tenants and everything. Of course, when I check on tenants, like, well, this is broken, that's broken. About $1,000 disappeared into that. Right. So I was like, I wish 10 years ago I didn't have these worries. I can just $1,000 go in toys instead of this.
And there we go. That is the end of the interview with Chi. Thank you so much to Chi for taking the time to talk to us. Thanks to Tim for helping me along with that interview. Thanks to Jason Murrell of the Order of Battle podcast for helping us with the logistics of finding a room and sitting in. And particularly big thanks to Josh Eggerbean and the After Action Report team for really sort of pointing me in his direction. And if you're interested in the Bench Press Studios story, you can hear the other side of it in that book, because there is a 2-page interview in the After Action Report Volume 2, which focuses on the Devil's Due era. There is a 2-page interview there with Benny Powell. So interesting to see another take on that same era from the other key player at Bench Press. So yeah, what an interesting and surprising story to come from the floor of JoeFest. If you've been enjoying this interview, then check out some of our other JoeFest coverage and indeed some of the other Talking Joe coverage as we continue to cover the Skybound comics and more besides. So until next time, I've been Mark. You've been listening to Talking Joe. And don't forget that nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast. Laters.